Hello and welcome to the NYR Facebook chat with our friends HSS. My name is Coach Steve. We have Anil, who is a physical therapist from HSS. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. So happy to be back in person.
And guess what? It's springtime.
Oh, I can't wait. As you can tell, my allergies are acting up.
It is amazing to be here. As you said, it is our first hospital special surgery chat in person since the pandemic. I'm glad you're back, Anil. This weekend, if you're in New York City, we have our Shape and Health Women's Half Marathon in Central Park. Next, we'll also have our Newport, New Jersey 5K coming up. And of course, next month, the RBC Brooklyn Half. So if you have any training questions, injury questions, today is a day to ask those questions. Put those down below in the chat down below. We'll answer those questions throughout the show. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, we'll answer those throughout the show. So add them below. If you ask some pre-submitted questions, we will also answer those throughout the chat. But Anil, I want to dive into our conversation. So we have two nice, great segments for these. We're going to talk about back pain, which I think is very important for runners. Also, how to strengthen your back, because it's very important, I'm sure, part of the kinetic chain. And also just how to avoid injuries as a new runner. A lot of runners think hibernate during the winter, and then you come out of hibernation and you want to start running again. So we're going to kind of talk about how to do that safely. So let's start off with that kind of the back pain. And talk about how it affects runners as a whole. How should we keep it healthy, and kind of dive in deeper along the way?
Yeah, I think the back is a common injury spot for all runners. And, you know, the back, I kind of look at it as like the back and the hips are kind of the gateway to the upper body and the lower body. So if those things are having some kind of dysfunction, then we can lead to problems in the lower extremities or the upper extremities. So I think, like, you know, basically having a good, strong core stability program while you're running, while you're training, while you're warming up to kind of get things going in your low back, you know, that kind of helps best help with all injuries and just kind of get you primed and ready to go for your run.
So what are some of those things we should be doing? You said core work. So we're working, even though our back might be hurting, we want to work on that front section. Am I hearing you right? And why is that? It seems like you should do back workouts for back pain or back injuries.
I am so glad you brought that up, Steve, because, you know, to me, you know, everyone thinks about the core as your abdominals, those great washboard abs that I have currently.
We both do.
but more so, the core muscles are pretty much your core set, right? So that being your front abdominal muscles, your side abdominal muscles, and your back muscles there. So the way I think about core stability is actually more than just crunches and sit-ups or even leg raises. It's more so about how can I turn on my core muscles while standing still, while isometrically contracting. So for instance, things like planks I think are fantastic. Things like dead bugs, bird dogs, all those things to kind of stabilize your core while you maybe move your extremities are kind of the best ways to kind of turn things on and keep things going.
Google dead bugs and bird dog and all that kind of stuff. I love how we have these terms of these workouts, and I'm sure you live saying it as a PT also. A lot of runners will tell us as coaches, we'll get messages that their lower back is hurting during a race, a training session, you know, you're getting lower back pain during your run. Is there a cause for that? Usually, obviously, every situation is a little different, but the general kind of overview that we can tell runners lower back might equal and a solution for that. Maybe it's planks, maybe it's that kind of stuff. But how do we, you know, the lower back pain when you have it when you run?
Yeah, while running, I think, you know, the quick answer, of course we can dive into so many different answers, but I think the quick answer would be some kind of issue in like what we call a length tension relationship between your hip flexors and your hamstrings. A lot of times when those things are either undertrained or you know, overly tight, it can kind of pull on the low back, and then therefore you can have those types of symptoms while you're running. They usually don't happen until, you know, when you start to exert yourself, when you're when those muscles are starting to fatigue and pulling weirdly on your back and hips. So that would be my quick answer.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course, like, you know, I think you know, running form would be one of the best things too. A lot of times if you're having that back pain and it's sustained, something in your form is kind of throwing you off.
I ran a marathon this last week, and a lot of times I had, wasn't back, but shoulder. So a lot of times you hear shoulders and upper back, soreness, tightness. Is it similar? Do you see a similar cause and solutions to upper back, lower shoulders, or do you think that's different from lower back?
You know, I think it's all similar in the sense that stability is key.
Okay.
but also proper mobility. The thoracic spine or your upper back is often kind of neglected a little bit in a rehab protocol or even just a strength training protocol. So keeping yourself limber in your upper back, because as we know, your upper back and your arms really propel you forward during your running stride.
Love that. I want to jump over to questions. As I said, guys, if you have any questions for us, please put them in the chat. But let's go to questions and shout-outs.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Hello, everybody out there. We have 2 shout-outs so far. We got Janet from the Sunshine State. Any guesses on what that state is? Any guesses?
Florida.
There we go. They can testing the crowd here, testing you guys. And then we got Per coming in from Norway.
Norway, wonderful.
We got one down south, one up north, so we're getting everybody else. So keep leaving those shout-outs and the questions in there. We have a question coming at you, Neil, from Per, actually from our Norway listener here. They're asking, I just lost the questions, man. This thing is killing me, bro. Here we go. He's not using weights, so what are the best workouts to do, I guess, body resistance?
Yeah, if you don't have, weights to kind of test yourself, you don't need them, right? I think calisthenics will be great. Just simply, body weight squats or even just holding household items is great. During the pandemic, I think we've all become very creative with how to, at least from a clinician standpoint, treating patients, and then from a patient standpoint, using things around their house in order to resist themselves.
I use my kids, by the
yeah,
way.
there you go. That's great.
Is that okay?
And I actually, with that, great, because you have some weight and you have what we call perturbations, so that the vibrating movements of
I think
of
heavier
the
each day, it
objects,
feels like.
it definitely helps there. So yeah, definitely household items. If you have resistive bands, I think that's a great tool to use too. But really, you don't need those things as long as you are practicing things with good form and kind of doing a good amount of volume. You're definitely going to get nice and ready for your performance or your training.
Wonderful. And we got one more for you, Neil. This is a very specific question. Can you train and run a marathon with an L5 S1 fusion? We were talking about the back earlier, so it kind of leads right into that.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely you can. Those segments of our body, L4, L5, S1, that's where we kind of bear most of our weight through. That's a very common fusion spot, so definitely makes sense. But you absolutely can train and run for a marathon with that in mind. But that's where core stability actually comes into hugely, just because you do need that extra stability to make sure that fusion is working right and make sure those other segments are compensating for your fused segment. So yes, absolutely.
Are there any precautions that someone who maybe has had back pain, like chronic back pains, back surgery, we're talking about obviously people who have been to doctors many times, they might need more strength training, more than you may recommend your everyday runner, or more physical therapy as preventative for training for a marathon if you've been major back issues in the past?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I guess the short answer would be, I just think they need to be a little bit more mindful of their training, of their regimen. So for instance, potentially if you and I miss a day of, simple stretches or mobility drills, it may not affect us too much. But for that population, missing a day could actually, and then you jump right into a training session or a running session, it could actually set you back a little bit. So I think being a little bit more diligent with knowing the pathologies that you have already, really focusing on core stability, your mobility, those patients will often have like an inherent sense of stiffness in their back and throughout their body. So always staying loose and limber. Taking the time to do those things before you jump into training.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Any more, Coach Ben? All right, let's do it. She wants you to say run.
No offense, but I had to really think what that was there.
It was so bad.
And as I sounded out in my head and spell it in my head, It's actually chondromalacia patella.
He was close. He was
yeah,
close. I mean,
yes,
good try. Might have been a typo
absolutely.
too. You never know.
So,
Yeah, actually, it's CHONDROMALCIA.
So definitely a little typo there. So it is.
Yeah.
It's chondromalacia patella, and basically,
Okay.
with that disorder, it's that small little bone that connects your knee and all your muscles there, your patella. There's some kind of dysfunction there, some kind of grinding sensation. So, as the question, excuse me, if you can remind me the question.
Yeah, the question was her PT has advised her to stop running completely, and obviously seeking a second opinion here on live on YouTube and Facebook today.
Yeah. So to tackle that, I would
She
say
wants to say, "Can I run?"
Yeah. I'm not really a big fan, and why I guess a little anecdote why I got into PT is I'm not a big fan of like telling a patient to stop doing something that they love, and I think there's always a way around it. If not from a internal source, meaning that you are getting stronger on your own, getting more flexible on your own, and really working that area, I think for sure some external aids like bracing or taping could definitely help that area. So again, long story short, I think you can definitely continue running, but you have to do it in a very smart and systematic way. And so if things do get worse, then we would refer you probably to a physician to potentially have some form of intervention for that.
We got one more question coming at you, two gentlemen. How many days a week would you recommend a runner do strength training?
Yeah, I think it varies on the individual, and I think for people starting out, maybe even new to strength training, I would start about 1 to 2 times a week. After you build up some steam, know what's going on, know good form, and also know how your body reacts to those movements with running as well too. So I would say 1 to 2 weeks to start, but then after that, you should really kind of ramp up to about 3 times a week or so.
Yeah, I'm someone as a coach, I try to only implement one new thing to a training plan at once. So we're going to maybe implement that strength train once, twice a week, but my mileage is going to stay the same. I don't want your mileage all of a sudden to go up 20 miles that next week while having a new strength plan. Or we're going to introduce a new tempo or track workout at the same time as we're entering this. As a coach, I like to do one new stimulus at a time, and then once you're comfortable with that, then you could add more days of strength training or more longer runs. So one thing at a time. I think it just keeps everything aligned. And if something happens, you know that variable of what happened. But yeah, I completely agree. Slowly at first, 1, twice a week. There's many forums online, many YouTube videos. I know HSS has some great stuff on your website that you can look at ways to strength train properly as a new runner, especially. Any more, Coach Bennett, for this moment? Okay, cool. Let's jump into what we're going to talk about for new runners and avoiding injuries, which I think is important. Some questions might have been related to that. I broke this down into 3 key sections. So first one being trained properly. Now, we kind of talk about that in many different ways, but I think easy runs, keep them easy, mileage, progression is gradual, and then long run workouts are designed for you. I'd love to hear your take on like easy mileage out there from a PT standpoint, and why you think not every run is a hard run. I have my coaching philosophy, but obviously not every run should be hard. Easy runs make you faster in the long run, I always say.
Yeah. And so yeah, I think exactly from a the running perspective, I think those easy runs are kind of what I use the analogy of like with strength training as like not every time you step into the gym you're trying to PR or have a personal record, right? You have design days where you're going to try to reach new limits, but all the prep behind it of maybe going at 50%, 75% is to then prime your body to then reach that 100% max as well too. So I think it would be irresponsible if someone were to have that mindset 100% every single time. Same thing with running too. Your body will break down a lot faster if you push it to push it 100% every single day, every single moment. So that's why these little things are kind of stepping stones to then getting to your goal. So easy runs, easy workouts, all right, to achieve whatever goal that you're trying to do.
And then mileage progress gradually. We kind of talked about this a little bit. I did with strength training, but it's a gradual build in your mileage. We're not going out there and running our first long run as 10 miles if we haven't even run a 5 mile or 5K before that. Gradually building up. I think we say as a 20% more each week, gradually, you're gradually building up. Look at a training plan, talk to your coach, gradually build it up. And then as you're building up, you're also taking weeks off to recover. So you see some training plans, they'll build you up a week and then a week off, then a week on, then a week off. Some training plans might have 3 weeks up, 1 week off. So there's very different thought processes and philosophies in that. But there's always those recovery weeks built into your plan, and you're gradually building your long runs more and more and more at a steady, consistent, gradual pace. The second point, Anil, we did talk about this, but I think we should talk about it one more time, is strength training regularly and how that affects just a stronger runner. While it avoids injuries, it also strengthens you as a runner and makes you a stronger runner and faster runner in the end.
Yeah, I think it just basically it prepares your body to do anything and everything. I think a regular strength training kind of is what allows your muscles, your joints to be healthy to move throughout whatever demand you place on it. So, for instance, if you never strength trained and you only ran, your muscles only know that one thing. And therefore, you're more susceptible to kind of break down quicker just because your muscles are going to get tired doing the same thing over and over again. So therefore, if you kind of mix it up, cross-train, strength train, your body is more inclined to be ready for any obstacle that places on itself. And of course, dosing properly so that way you're not too sore while doing something, or you're also not being challenged. You always want to be kind of challenged and your body's just ready to go.
Love it. And the third point, sleep. Sleep is key to that recovery. I wish on websites like Strava or anything, we always talk about how you rate the long run. Everyone loves it, but you don't really note your sleep days or your off days. And I wish we could celebrate those better because how important they are to a runner's journey, whether you're training for a race or your first 5K. That sleep and recovery days are what make you stronger. That's where those muscles recover, and that's where all that strength comes into play, and you get better off those sleep and recovery days.
Absolutely. I think sleep is the most important thing. That soreness that kind of sets in after you strength train or after you run. Sometimes when you don't have adequate sleep, it's even magnified.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where our body repairs itself. And that's where your body also kind of learns how to react, to the next time. So definitely sleep. I use different electronic kind of sleep tracking systems because, I just think the more data you have, the more you can kind of really tap into, how you feel and how you recover. So whatever kind of works for you, but definitely on a good regimen of sleep. Yeah.
Love it. So new runners, take note, write those down, rewind it if you missed them. Do we have any more question shout-outs, Coach?
Always. It's a running show. Will we have questions and shout-outs? It wouldn't be that fun. We have wouldn't be a Facebook Live without Coach Roberto chiming in from Barcelona.
On vacation.
I think that's somewhere upstate, right? I think you make a left off the throughway somewhere, make it right. You'll find it out there, runners. But thank you so much for listening out to everybody. So we got a couple of questions coming at you. Runners having numbness in their feet when running. How can they prevent it? Maybe some causes. What do we got for us, folks?
Yeah, so anytime I think about numbness in the feet or the hands, you immediately think of the spine, just because that's where your nerves come from.
It's not what I thought of. I'm glad you're here for that. I would not think the toes are spine related, but that's why Anil's here, guys.
Absolutely. So depending on, like for instance, with our question previously with the L5 S1, a lot of those nerves kind of go and innervate the foot there. So, for instance, like if a patient was having numbness and tingling, I would then first ask, do you have any low back pain? Do you have any history of that type of stuff? So it could be coming from the back, but also it could just be simply tightness down the legs. A lot of those nerves run intertwined with some of our muscles and different fascia. And so if those things are tight, can press on those nerves and therefore cause numbness and tingling in the feet. And then simply, it may sound ridiculous, your sneakers might be too tight.
That's my first reaction.
So kind of mixing it up a little bit with the tension of your laces or something like that, to potentially, see if that helps. Yeah.
And there are different ways to tie your shoe that might, at least, so you're tying it really tight because the heel slipping, for instance. There's different ways you can tie your shoe that I use for one of my shoes to avoid that heel slipping out, but it's still not loose, but it's also not tight. It's that middle ground that you want.
Absolutely. I think it's almost silly because when you grow up as a kid, one way to tie your shoes, And then as you develop these,
Like 20 ways.
yeah, there's so many different ways. So
Or you go without shoelaces, which I do
there
now.
you go. I'm a big fan of bunny ears, everyone. So yeah.
Love it, love it. We got another question. We have the RBC Brooklyn Half is about a scant 3 weeks away, I think. So we're starting to get those questions in there. We have obviously the Shape and Health Women's Half Marathon this weekend. Got a question. When should they start carb loading for a half marathon?
I like this question. So this is really, I'll definitely want you to chime in, but I'll chime in as a coaching perspective. This will depend on your background, your nutrition background, how your body reacts, how many half marathons you've done. Most people will start, the term used, carb loading, about 2 to 3 days out is when you kind of want to start that process. And we're not only eating carbs, we're kind of gradually adding more to our diet. So we're eating a little bit more for dinner that first night, and then it's a little more for dinner and lunch that next day, and then that final day, Friday, for the Brooklyn Half, might be breakfast, lunch, dinner. Once again, we're still eating one serving size. We're not going crazy with it. Maybe it's a Gatorade with our meal instead of a Snapple kind of stuff. So we're just gradually adding it, and then for breakfast, once again, you're kind of topping off that carbs the morning before the race.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. I just would like to emphasize that everybody is different in how they react to certain foods. Certain foods can be inflammatory to certain people. So finding different sources of carbs would be best, in order to just see what works best for you.
Perfect, Steve. This one's right up your alley. We have a shoe question. I know how much you like those. What type of shoes do you recommend for running if a runner is noticing a blister location pattern on the soles of their feet? Yeah, it's a kind of a unique one there.
Blister on the sole of the foot?
Yeah, I'm noticing a pattern in the blister location on the soles of my feet. So maybe it's a blister in the same spot all the time, like a pattern. Like it's always in the same spot.
I definitely want to hear you're from a PT standpoint. Have you seen that? I would say it could also be a sock issue. Make sure you're wearing like a technical sock. I'm assuming there's moisture in there somehow. So figure out what's causing that. Try like a body glide on that section too. That'll help alleviate any friction happening. I don't know if it's a shoe specifically. You can try different. There's not a brand that's going to avoid it. So if try a different brand completely. If you're in some type, try a completely different one. You can come to a running shoe store and make sure you're fitted properly for that shoe, and then try different brands in that same category. But it doesn't sound like a shoe issue. It's more of you have a lot of moisture in there causing that blister. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And for those who may have tuned into the presentation last week, I was kind of talking about the fact that your shoe and the bottom of your foot, just by looking at it, can really tell a story of how you move. And so, therefore, if someone has some kind of a wear pattern in their shoe, you can see that that's where they mostly put their pressure through. And of course, your walking shoes are going to be different from your running shoes. And so potentially, like where you're having that blister, definitely can be a wear and tear from a sock or moisture, but also how you load your foot too during your running mechanics or even during your walking mechanics. So I think definitely getting it kind of checked out, because those type of things, if you have a chronic blister and it opens, now you have an open wound. And so any moisture and stuff that goes in there, you can have other serious things happen. So I would say definitely get it checked out, see what you can do, or maybe even start to kind of pad your foot in certain places.
Wonderful. We got 2 more questions, and we'll wrap up a beautiful Wednesday here. Thank you so much for joining us today, Anil, and our partners at Hospital for Special Surgery. We have a runner with pain in the metatarsals after they're finishing their runs. Any thoughts on that? What could be going on there?
Yeah, again, to reiterate the other point, I think it's the same thing too. There's probably something in your stride putting more pressure through your metatarsals. Potentially even the equipment that you have, the shoe wear, the socks that you have, may not be supporting your foot as best as possible. But that pain after run is like usually a telltale sign of like something that's going on pathology-wise. There could be something going on, something called a neuroma of your foot that kind of lives within the metatarsals. It can kind of ignite. Sometimes with activity you might not feel it, but afterwards it really starts to throb. And so definitely get your foot checked out if things don't change, if you change your equipment.
Love it. Last one?
Last one, and it goes very well with the last segment we did about training properly, Coach Steve. Runner's asking, is a long run at easy pace considered a hard workout?
I would say yes. I think most athletes can do about 3 hard workouts a week. That hard, you can increase speed, you can increase distance. Those are the two kind of factors of what makes things hard. So you might have a track workout, 800 meters around the track, and you do that 4 times with rest in between. That's a hard workout. But a distance at a slower pace is also hard because you're increasing one of those two variables, speed or distance. If you combine those, that's what I call a race, where you're doing a distance and speed at the same time. So it is a considered hard workout where you want to rest or recover days on the bookends of those. So if your long run is a Sunday, you're resting, or easy run on Saturday and Monday. So those 2 days will not be your hard track workouts. But thank you guys so much. And thank you, Anil, for joining us today. I'm glad to be back at the Run Center live in person with you and everyone from HSS. We will see you next time, but thanks so much. If you're racing the Shape Women's Half this weekend, have a phenomenal race. We'll see you out there at the finish line. Good luck.